I used to think my grandfather was made of quiet things: the hush before sunrise, the steady rhythm of a broom across our front steps, the way he folded his cap as if it were a small bird settling into a nest. He moved through our house like a soft clock, marking time with small rituals. Yet beneath those gentle habits, there was a weight I could feel when I sat close to him, the kind of heaviness that gathers when a person has learned to live around an ache. He liked to read the backs of cereal boxes. Though read was not the word for it then, his finger would travel along the rows of letters like a farmer walking fence lines, testing for breaks. Sometimes he hummed, low and tuneless, as if the sound itself might turn letters into something friendly. When a delivery flyer came through the door, he would hold it at arm's length, nodding at the pictures and skipping lightly over the words. If someone asked a question about a sign in town, he would smile and gesture for me to answer first. I thought he was being kind. Later I understood he was hiding. He had spent a lifetime outside classrooms, harvesting seasons instead of sentences. People said he was a good man, the kind who could fix a gate with twine and patience, the kind who remembered the names of neighbors' dogs. But at the grocery store, I watched him stall by the automatic doors, pretending to admire a display while the checkout screens flickered with options he could not read. If I stepped forward, he let out a breath so quiet it was almost a thank you. His face never asked for help, but his shoulders did. When the mail arrived, he unfolded each letter with care, the way you might open a gift intended for someone else. He would study the lines like a map that refused to show north, then tuck the pages back, smooth the creases, and lean on the table as though the wood could share its certainty. Sometimes he placed an envelope under his palm and stayed that way, not moving, not speaking, as if pressing down might somehow press understanding into his skin. At night, he sat on the porch and watched the streetlight bloom. He never spoke about what he missed, but silence has a shape, and his was the shape of a closed door. I sensed how much he wanted that door to open. It lived in the way he traced letters on the fogged window pane, in the hopeful tilt of his head when I read aloud from my homework. He listened like someone waiting on weather, patient but aching for change, and I could feel the small tide inside him pulling towards something he had never been allowed to reach. The morning he first stepped into the school, the air itself seemed to hesitate. My grandfather walked beside me, his hand rough and warm, gripping mine with a strength that betrayed his trembling. He wore his best shirt, the one my mother had pressed until it shone faintly in the light, as though he were dressing not for class but for a ceremony. In a way, he was. Each step toward the school gates carried the weight of decades, years when learning was a dream too fragile to even whisper aloud. The children gathered in clusters, their voices bubbling like streams after rain. Some stared openly at him, curiosity sparking in their eyes. A few giggled, whispering behind cupped hands, their laughter sharp enough to slice through his pride. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he would turn back. But then he looked down at me, and I saw the flicker of determination that had once kept his fields alive through storms and droughts. He nodded, as if reminding himself that courage does not wait for permission. Inside the classroom, the teacher paused when she saw him. Surprise softened quickly into warmth, and she motioned him to a seat beside me. The desk looked almost comical beneath his broad frame, his knees bent awkwardly, his hands too large for the tiny space. But he sat there with a quiet dignity, as though the wood itself had been waiting all these years to hold him. When the lesson began, the chalk danced across the board, drawing symbols that had mocked him for most of his life. His eyes followed every line, every curve, and though his lips moved silently, I knew he was practicing each shape in his heart. His first attempts to write were shaky, his pencil pressing too hard, breaking the tip more than once. A few children snickered, but the teacher's gentle voice steadied him, and I leaned close, whispering encouragement. For every letter he managed to form, no matter how crooked, he exhaled as though releasing years of silence. The hardest part was not the lessons themselves, but the shadow of shame. I saw it in the way his hand hesitated above the page, as though afraid of betraying him. I saw it when he glanced around the room, measuring himself against children who scribbled with ease. Yet each time he faltered, he straightened his back, gripped the pencil once more, and began again. Walking home that afternoon, he was quiet, but when we reached the porch, he placed his notebook on the table with a tenderness I had never seen. His first letters, uneven and uncertain, filled the page like seedlings just breaking the earth. He ran his hand across them, and for the first time, I saw pride replace the weight in his shoulders. He had taken the first step back, and though the road ahead was long, he had begun. The weeks that followed were a slow battle, fought not with swords but with pencils and patience. My grandfather struggled with the smallest things. The curve of an S slipped away from him. The stubborn tail of a G refused to settle. His hand shook each time he tried to write his name, as though the letters themselves carried the weight of all the years he had been denied them. There were days when he closed his notebook too quickly, ashamed of the uneven lines, and sat in silence while the other children packed their bags. But there were also victories, small and glowing. The first time he read a sign aloud on the street, his voice cracked with disbelief. When he managed to spell my name without help, he laughed so hard the sound startled the birds from the wires. His joy was unpolished, raw, like a child's discovery of something entirely new. Each success, however fragile, became a stone in the foundation of a new self. He was building brick by careful brick. The town began to notice. Neighbors shook their heads, muttering that he was too old to be in a classroom. Others smiled quietly, their eyes softening as they watched him walk with his notebook tucked under his arm. Children who once laughed at his trembling hand now leaned closer, curious about the man who came back each day, despite every stumble. My grandfather never answered their looks with words. Instead, he kept showing up, steady as the turning of seasons, proving with his presence what he could not yet say. Then came the day he whispered a request to me. He wanted to write a letter, not just any letter, but one meant for the woman he had loved all his life and lost years ago. My grandmother had passed before I was born, and though her picture still rested on the mantel, I had never seen him speak to it. Now, with his notebook open, he bent low, pressing the pencil to the page, as though kneeling in prayer. It took him hours. He wrote slowly, pausing often, erasing, starting again. His sentences were short, his words simple, but they were alive with all the things he had never been able to say. At last, he held up the paper with shaking hands and asked me to read it with him. His voice followed mine, halting but steady, carrying every word into the night air. When we finished, he folded the letter carefully and placed it beside her photograph. He sat back, eyes wet but shining, his chest rising with a breath that seemed to free something long locked inside him. In that moment, I realized he had not just learned to write, he had learned to release regret, to claim a part of himself that had always been waiting. And as I looked at him, proud and unburdened, I understood that his journey was not only his, but a lesson etched into me forever. There are stories that live not in grand victories, but in quiet, steady steps. My grandfather's journey taught me that the courage to begin again is the truest form of strength. He showed that it is never too late to learn, to heal, to reclaim what was once lost. The old man who went back to school left behind more than letters. On a page he left a reminder that every day offers a new beginning. If this story touched you, share it with others. Leave a thought in the comments and subscribe for more heartfelt tales.